Hey friends, it's Carrie from Dream Up. If you follow me on Instagram, you may have seen that I've been working on building a diorama for Animal Crossing New Horizons resident services. So far, I've completed the shelf and I finished the cabinet that's going to be part of the coffee station. At this point, I thought it'd be a good idea to work on the space in which the furniture will live. That is, the walls and the floor of resident services. I started by building the structure out of corrugated plastic. I did this so I could measure things in the three-dimensional space, and also so I could ensure I was getting the proportions of the individual furniture pieces just right. I made some simple shapes out of cardstock to act as placeholders for the rest of the furniture. The shelf I built appears to be a little bit too tall, but I don't think it's going to unbalance the rest of the piece, so I'm leaving that for now. At this point, I decided to adjust the size and placement of the door and windows before I transferred the pattern to wood. I used 1/4 inch MDF for this project, and I'm working in inches. The dimensions of my piece are going to be 16 inches by 14 inches by 10 inches. I cut out the door and windows using a coping saw, and I cleaned up all the edges using a Dremel sanding wheel, some hand files, and some sandpaper. I primed most of the surfaces with Zinsser BIN. I gave everything a few coats and let it dry overnight. Then I lightly sanded the primer with some 220 grit sandpaper. Using my new Glowforge laser cutter, I cut out hundreds of half-inch square pieces of chipboard to use as tiles. Resident Services has 896 tiles. When I started to glue these on, I realized I had miscalculated. I had anticipated that the Glowforge would cut out the half-inch tiles and leave a nice kerf width that I could use for the grout lines. Nope. I just did a quick search for a kerf width on the Glowforge, and I'm reading here it's 0.2 millimeters. I need more than that for the grout lines. So back to Illustrator. I resized my file, uploaded it to the Glowforge, and cut another 900 plus tiles. I glued these directly to the unprimed surface of the floor using PVA glue, and I checked my measurements along the way. So at this point, I need to fill the grout lines. I'm trying to decide if I'm going to fill the gaps with something grout-like and then prime it, or if I can just use the Zinsser BIN over the whole thing and it will seep into the cracks and look like a grout. So it's been a couple of days, and you can see here the Zinsser BIN did not work out the way I expected it to, so I moved on to plan B. I ended up using the Zinsser as a primer, and then I painted the tiles and sealed the floor with a clear top coat. My thought was the clear coat would allow me to fill the grout lines and then clean up any excess with a damp sponge. This actually worked out really well. For the grout, I used this lightweight spackling. Next, I cut some chipboard strips to use as paneling on the walls. I probably could have cut this by hand, but I get a much better result with my Glowforge. So satisfying. Once I had the chipboard strips, I glued them to the walls with some PVA glue. I made sure to leave room around the door for the trim and to leave a little gap at the bottom of the wall where it'll attach to the floor. I primed and painted the paneling off camera and let it dry. Then I did a dry fit with the pieces and realized I needed to trim some of the paneling off the bottom for a better fit. Here I'm just trimming a tiny bit off the bottom of the wall. Then I assembled the walls and floor using wood glue. At this point I realized I needed to trim the tops of the paneling too. I wanted to add a piece of molding, but I wanted it flush with the wall. This would have been a lot easier if I'd done it before assembling everything. I glued the chair rail to the wall, and then I used my Glowforge to cut out the window trim and glued that in place as well. I doubled up some strips of chipboard to make the baseboards, and then I glued these into the diorama. I ended up repainting the walls. I wanted a slightly cooler color than I originally used, and I wanted to add a little bit of texture. I must have added the door trim off camera since I couldn't find any footage of it, but then I taped off the areas I didn't want to get messy, and then I painted the trim and the paneling one more time. Somehow I managed to get paint in places I didn't mean to, so I had to touch up a few spots, but now it's done. And now I'm getting pretty excited to see the rest of this come together. If you want to build your own Animal Crossing New Horizons Resident Services diorama and you have any questions about my process, please let me know in the comments below. And as always, thank you for watching and have a magical day.